Welcome to the Future is Gold podcast series, hosted by Alexandra. We believe in empowering you to take control of your future so you can live the life that you want. And we do that by allowing you to buy, send, spend, earn and secure the world's oldest currency, gold, while being supported by modern technology. At Nuggets, our mission is clear. We're making gold accessible for everyone by giving you the knowledge and expertise needed to make informed and smart financial decisions that benefit you.
Hi, and welcome back to episode 15 of the Future is Gold podcast. I'm your host, Alexandra. As the world deals with climate change and rising energy prices, sustainability is now more important than ever. In this ever-changing post-COVID world, there is increasing interest and investment in carbon credits. Nearly 350 million carbon credits were issued in 2021 alone, which is a 220% increase from the year before. As more companies set ambitious net zero targets in line with the Paris Agreement and shareholders and investors push for ESG performance. On this episode, I'm joined by Patrick Michalowski, Vice President at Drumlin Capital Management. At Drumlin, Patrick invests in nature-based carbon projects that help and avoid global greenhouse gas emissions by working with NGOs and local communities to protect, restore and manage forests, wetlands and coastal ecosystems. Patrick, obviously the projects that you work on at Drumlin have significant social and economic co-benefits. Why is it important to focus on reducing global emissions?
Well, thanks for having me on this podcast, Alexandra. I'd say we are kind of all citizens of this planet, so it's important for us to do everything we can to reduce the impact on the environment and to really preserve nature for future generations. So the carbon projects we invest in really are seeking to kind of evaluate those risks higher global emissions have over the course of that investment and really understand kind of the impacts of it and to really mitigate those impacts and create not only a reduced and a reduction in global emissions, but also creating co-benefits to the local communities that are operating those projects and are within those regions of those projects. So I think it's really key and important to really focus on reducing global emissions and really highlighting that with the carbon projects that we invest in, many others are looking at.
Well, it's certainly powerful work, and we will talk a bit more about those co-benefits throughout the episode. Patrick, as the strain that climate change is placing on businesses and economies becomes more evident, there is an accelerated need for industries and companies to change the way that they operate. Have you noticed, Patrick, that more businesses now are taking responsibility to reduce their contribution to climate change?
It's definitely been a key theme. So I think we've seen significantly more corporates taking climate pledges, climate goals, climate targets and actions. Based on some data we've seen, about a third of Fortune 500 companies have committed to reducing their carbon footprint. And that could come in all various stages. In terms of just carbon accounting, there are scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Scope 1 and 2 are kind of tied directly to internal things within a company. Scope 2 is kind of a little ancillary, and Scope 3 is part of those global supply chains and how the products that they source have. There's a number of carbon accounting firms that are actually providing services to really have corporates easily and be able to calculate those emissions and to know exactly how much carbon they are producing and what they would like to meet in order to reduce those carbon footprint goals.
Well, it's great. And I'm really glad that people are picking up more on that theme. They are definitely putting in greater responsibility initiatives to place greater focus on sustainability, which is great. Patrick, soon there'll be sets of mandated governance that might make it compulsory, not voluntary anymore, for large companies and corporations, such as you mentioned, to deliver validated sustainability action. The requirements for these companies is going to become perhaps more demanding, and regulators have clearly shown that they intend to police this space and force action. What are your thoughts on increased regulation? Is that something that you think needs to happen?
So I think in any business, having a clear rule of law is very critical. So in order to operate anything, you want to know what's kind of the rule of law. So we do welcome kind of regulators to really consult with these global business leaders and governments to really create a global framework around carbon. And carbon isn't bound by one jurisdiction. All its emissions and reductions can be in any country. So it's critical for regulators to also, as they're working through and determining what are the proper frameworks, to also work with all the other countries and governments around the world to really create one uniform framework, so it's easy to be able to transact, to be able to move, import, export, and count and verify and validate all of these kind of global carbon credits into one. While right now there are compliance markets in carbon, there's also a big voluntary market, and I feel over time those might merge or become one global carbon market. Right now, the voluntary market is providing additional ways for corporates to reduce their emissions because there's only so much compliance markets can offer in terms of corporate offsets and reductions.
Well, it's really interesting, and it's great that there's going to be changes coming in this space. And as you said, the more they can merge and unify it, it makes it easy for people to subscribe to it too. It's not only from the regulators' side that people are looking for, greater crackdowns in this space, but also more and more consumers actually want to choose companies that care about their carbon footprint. There's an online survey by Nielsen, which 81% of global respondents communicated that they feel strongly that companies should help improve the environment. A lot of consumers are saying the onus isn't just on them, like they're happy to make the small changes, but they really think the big companies should be the ones making the major changes in this space. Patrick, how important do you think it is for companies to be communicating their sustainability efforts with their consumers?
So I think increasingly consumers across different generations are also demanding more of that, but they're also demanding not only companies make those efforts, but more transparency into how those are able to be achieved. So sustainable business practices have been around for a while and companies have been making pledges, but I think it's tying in and showcasing to those consumers how those are. So one example, I recently purchased a product from one company, and they actually incorporated sustainability into their mission statement. So part of their mission statement was really focused on the health and well-being of people, but also focused on the environment and how they were able to really accomplish it throughout their packaging. Even it was demonstrating, this is our mission statement. Our goals in terms of helping create a more sustainable planet is we're going to work with One Tree Planted to plant one tree for each order that's placed. And then in addition to that, they also offset their company's carbon emissions. So they calculated what their carbon emissions were across all their supply chains, across everything, and really used that to invest in renewable energy projects. So and offset those emissions by forwarding and investing in those renewable energy projects. So it's a way for a consumer to really see firsthand, this is what the company's about in terms of their mission, and this is how they're able to achieve it. And you can go and see the trees that they planted in which region and whatnot, or the credits that they purchased. So it's really a powerful way for companies to really showcase to their consumers they're doing something, and these are the actions that they're taking.
And I guess by putting that already straight in your mission statement, you're building a foundation around that, which is really, really great for consumers to see that. It's not only going to impress customers, but it can actually save businesses money as well by being more sustainable and, trying to reduce those carbon emissions too. So definitely can be a win-win situation all round. Patrick, let's take a look at some bigger companies that are doing this work and definitely communicating what their initiatives are. Companies such as Apple at the moment are certainly making positive headlines. They announced a target of becoming carbon neutral across their entire business and manufacturing supply chain by 2030. Microsoft, arguably, they're trying to go even further by promising to also be carbon negative by 2030. And by 2050, they've made a promise to remove all of the carbon from the environment that the company has ever emitted since its inception in 1975. Patrick, do you think that like big technology giants, these are some of the most profitable companies in the world. Do you think they have a responsibility to really jump on this bandwagon and act quickly?
Yeah, I think it's great to see technology companies kind of doing their part to reduce global emissions. I think many other companies could kind of take the lead and do the same and really showcase to their consumers, to the world, to the governments, what actions they're kind of taking. Tech companies clearly have a lot more higher margin than a lot of other industries, but I think it's still good business practice overall to really evaluate your company and see where you could kind of find ways to reduce costs, potentially reduce emissions, and maybe create an environment that's a win-win for the company. So it seems like they've done that. They've really spent the time to really look at these. And they are some of the biggest carbon offset buyers in the market for sure right now. A lot of technology companies are big carbon offset buyers, but they're not the only ones. Many other companies are also taking part in doing it and seeing kind of the positive benefits of doing that.
And Patrick, what about smaller companies? Like, do you think that even for smaller companies, you mentioned they're the big guys, the big giants, but for smaller companies, do you think carbon neutrality should always kind of be an aspirational goal as well?
I think every company or every person, anyone should strive to kind of do what they can to reduce emissions. I think going back, it might make positive business sense. Maybe there's ways to cost save and those bottom line savings might help a smaller company out a lot more than maybe a larger company. So I think evaluating kind of how business is done, where your supply chains are, and if there's ways of reducing, ways of minimizing it, ways of instilling even corporate practices that kind of help recycle and do the bare bones is very critical. If you're large or if you're small, I think everyone could benefit from doing something.
Absolutely. I think in 2023, we're seeing that regardless of the size or the shape of your organization, environmental goals and initiatives, they kind of must be part of your corporate strategy. Consumers are starting to demand it. And as we talked about, regulators soon as well. With sea levels rising and oceans becoming warmer, longer, more intense droughts threaten crops, wildlife and fresh water supplies. Our planet's diversity of life is at risk from the changing climate, and with humans and wild animals are now facing new challenges for survival. Patrick, to avoid the worst effects of changing climates, we need to dramatically reduce global carbon emissions. Can you tell us why perhaps carbon credits are maybe one of the crucial tools to get us there?
Sure. So I think carbon credits really help provide a measurable unit for everyone to be able to quantify emissions. So one carbon credit is equivalent to 1 ton of carbon dioxide emitted. So those help quantify the intensity of the activities that we have on our planet, as well as ways to reduce and offset those activities, whether it is compliance markets or voluntary carbon markets. Having a standardized measurement allows individuals to be able to measure, then go out and offset their emissions.
Exactly. I think with more standardization, there can be better transparency as well, because it's very easy to market yourself as a green company, but when we're all kind of held to the same guidelines and they can show actually what they're doing, it's definitely more helpful. Patrick, we've seen a particular category of carbon credits lead the way, and it's been high quality nature-based carbon credits. Can you talk a little bit about what exactly they are and what should business leaders nowadays know about them?
Sure. So I'll unpack that question a little bit because there's a lot of new words out there. So just on carbon credits. So when we think of carbon credits, we're looking at kind of verified emissions reductions. So they're created when you remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and it's quantified and validated and verified. One example and one of the easiest ways to reduce your real carbon footprint is to go out, plant a tree. As you might remember from science class, trees sequester carbon dioxide. They convert that energy via photosynthesis and then release oxygen back into the air, critical for sustaining human and nature kind. So In terms of a nature-based carbon credit, those credits are really focused on credits that are generated from protecting, restoring, managing forest, wetland, coastal ecosystems, etc., across the globe. So very focused on different types of fauna and flora and other things that really create and reduce those emissions. Back to planting a tree, you could plant a tree that creates a nature-based carbon credit. And when you talk about high quality carbon credits, we view those that are aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So those goals really focus on two things. They're focused on tackling climate change and also fostering and developing a sustainable ecosystem for others and around it. So in addition to kind of the removals nature-based high-quality credits have on removing emissions, the projects also create social and economic benefits for the local communities where the projects are located. So it could be everything from job training to forms of healthcare to education, etc., that help those communities because we need a symbiotic kind of relationship between the communities that are there and living in the ecosystem and helping to protect, preserve, reforest, replant that ecosystem to really have a scalable and positive outcome for a project and to also have it be around for a long while. We don't want any projects to just kind of stop after a few years. We want sustainability. So partnering with local ecosystems as well as the cohabitants of those ecosystems really create a symbiotic relationship.
That's great. We spoke to Louis Lagou. He's from One Tree Planted on episode 4 of the podcast. And he discussed as well a lot about these social and economic co-benefits too, which was a really, really great episode. If you haven't had a chance to check out podcast episode 4, I believe it's called Business with a Heart of Gold, have a listen to that one as well. It was really great to chat to him too. Patrick, let's talk a little bit more about carbon neutral supply chains. You mentioned it earlier. As we come out of the other side of the pandemic, supply chains will become, if they are not already, a strategic topic. And sustainability and resiliency of supply chains will be key topics in board meetings globally. Patrick, how important do you think it is to look at supply chains when striving to reduce a carbon footprint?
So I'll say supply chains actually make up probably the largest source of any corporate's kind of carbon emissions. These emissions are kind of generated from the procurement of different products, from the processing, packaging, shipping, and disposal of any product the company kind of has and sells towards their consumers. So usually those are quantified in that scope 3 emission, like products running through your supply chain from your sourcing to then your end sales. And on average, it's quantified that those scope 3 emissions roughly make up 6 times more emissions than any company's scope 1 and 2 emissions. So a company could have cars that it's driving around and it could have an office building that's consuming energy and whatnot. Those scope 1 and 2 emissions, easy to quantify. Those scope 3 emissions are roughly 6 times more because you're just bound by sourcing and producing and moving goods from all parts of the world to all other parts of the world. So as corporates really focus, I think it's key for them to focus on these scope 3 emissions and reducing those emissions.
That's great. Yeah, definitely. So Patrick, another significant driver behind the sustainability momentum is the very real financial impact that climate change is having on companies' existing business models. The pandemic-influenced shortages of the last 2 years have proven that globalized supply chains are vulnerable and they can actually break down quickly when impacted, as we've seen. Patrick, what effects do you think that exploding energy costs, crop failures, the supply chain disruptions that we've been seeing, what effects do you think these have on existing business models and what can companies do about it?
So the most real effects is it drives inflation all across to consumers. So it's just higher cost of to anyone who's purchasing products. And we've seen that throughout the board. I think inflation has been very rampant all across every economy, and that's led to a lot of pressures on consumers as they're purchasing products to really take that and factor that into account. So a lot of these crop failures, supply chain disruptions really have impacted consumers first and foremost with their pocketbooks. It's just become more expensive to do business. As those kind of moderate and peter out, I think we'll see kind of a more moderate way of doing business. But I think companies are also trying to learn from those lessons, learn from the difficulty of sourcing, the difficulty of moving products across the board to really start creating products maybe closer to home. So those can have more positive effects and definitely less global reduction of emissions as well as if your products are made closer to home. But it could balance out by also higher cost of labor in the countries that are producing closer to home.
And with producing closer to home, you have those co-benefits again, as you mentioned, jobs for the region, creating business and momentum in those places too. So Patrick, we spoke a little bit about One Tree Planted before, a very interesting organisation that are very transparent about the work that they're doing all around the world. If you haven't seen their website, you can check it out on onetreeplanted.org. And they really go in and show the projects that they're working on globally, all around the world, tree planting organisation. What are your thoughts on organisations such as them and the work that they are doing?
Yeah, I think One Tree Planted's a great example, and many companies are working with them to actually plant trees and really meet their kind of climate goals, sustainable benefit goals, emission reduction goals. It's also a very simple way to kind of partner with an organization that will kind of do all the heavy lifting for you. They're going to go out, they're going to plant a tree, they're going to work with the local communities and such. And they are kind of aligned with a lot of these UN goals of really not only tackling climate change, but also fostering sustainable development across the region. And they operate in so many different regions that it's great. You can kind of pick and choose where your consumers are, where your production facilities are, and really hone in and focus on where you kind of want to make the most impact. So I think it's a great way for companies to partner and create benefits and create emissions reductions right away and plant a tree and have it out there for a lifetime.
Absolutely. You mentioned heavy lifting because not all companies will even have the manpower or the resources to do this type of work yourself. So it's really great that they can partner with companies like One Tree Planted that are really easy to work with. They give you those tangible results, as we mentioned, which you can then communicate back to your organization. So at Nuggets, we have partnered with One Tree Planted, and we have a really great initiative with them. We basically plant a tree for every new Nuggets account opened. And then for every $1,000 of gold invested into Nuggets, we'll plant an additional tree. So people that are, saving each month their savings away, over the course of their saving journey with Nuggets, they might plant multiple trees, which we hope is having a greater effect on the environment as well. Patrick, I want to talk a little bit about Nuggets because obviously this is our podcast. You were one of the initial investors in the Nuggets business. What was it about Nuggets that motivated you to invest?
So for me, it was really kind of a simple way to diversify and cost-effective way to diversify with no fees on kind of investing in gold. But also Nuggets focus on kind of trying to become a very environmentally friendly and I did hear Phoebe's story on the podcast, and it was very impactful in terms of her going through those Australian bushfires. And I remember us raising money in donations for that when that happened several years ago. So it was definitely something that had and resonated kind of with the way not only is it simple and easy to do in terms of investing, but it also provides additional good and additional reductions of emissions through the tree plantings and other initiatives you guys do have. So I think it's a nice symbiotic relationship, make it simple and easy, as well as help contribute and offset emissions.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, we really appreciate your support. And the episode that Patrick's referring to is episode 3, where Phoebe really talks about why sustainability and the environment is a real driving factor in everything that she does, and namely in the Nuggets business as well. Patrick, thank you very much for your time on your episode. I've really enjoyed diving into these topics with you. We looked at why companies need to focus on sustainability, nature-based carbon credits as a tool to fight climate change, and also looking at carbon neutral supply chains and what an impact they have on a business's sustainability efforts. One of our aspirational goals at Nuggets is to reach carbon neutrality. And Patrick, with insights such as yours and having your expertise to refer to, we move slightly closer each day. As sustainability reaches a critical moment, there are signs that 2023 may see the green spark the world has been waiting for to ignite a revolution. Let's hope that by working together, startups, corporations, and investors will partner to find the innovative solutions that our world needs now more than ever. If you would like to calculate your carbon footprint, you can head to nuggets.com, where we have a blog titled Nuggets for Nature, which has a link to a simple carbon footprint calculator. To learn more about the latest financial trends and insights, follow our podcast for more episodes.
Thanks for listening to the Future is Gold podcast. For links and contact details relevant to this episode, please see the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast series so you'll know when the next episode is live. And follow Nuggets on social media for more gold standard content. Information contained within this series is general in nature and not directed to your personal situation. So please reach out to us or your financial expert for a more tailored approach. This podcast is a Story League production.